Hey, everybody, welcome to Colorado Sun. My name is Jason Blevins. I'm an outdoors reporter at the Colorado Sun, and we're joined today with Lloyd Athearn and Jeff Sparhawk, and we are going to talk about some mountain safety stuff, some 14er climate stuff, and kind of just a fun, quick conversation on how we can maybe maximize our fun and safety in the high country. Let's just get rolling. Real quick, Jeff, I know we're going to be talking about mountains and kind of alpine climbing. And Lloyd Athearn, by the way, is with Colorado 14ers Initiative. Jeff Sparhawk is with the Colorado Search and Rescue Association. These two gentlemen are well acquainted with alpine environments and playing in the Colorado backcountry. And Jeff, let's get it kicked off with you real quick. Let's go. We're going to talk about mountains, but it's pretty hard to not talk about what's going on in the whitewater scene right now. We've had as many as 16 people killed in swiftwater accidents, drowned on our rivers and creeks so far this season. Not even July. That is a torrid and terrible pace. But real quick, the snow that we saw this season is obviously pouring down the mountains right now, and it's filling our rivers and creeks and increasing danger. Jeff, what are you hearing from some of your search and rescue teams around the state in terms of what's going on out there in our swiftwater?
Well, first, thanks, Jason. Thanks, Colorado Sun. Thanks, Lloyd, for making this happen and letting us get these messages out. Right? Coming to Colorado, enjoying Colorado is a huge treat. Right? It's why a lot of us live here, and respecting our environment is so super important. Right? If it was easy, if it was flat, we wouldn't be here. And part of Colorado is the rivers and enjoying the rivers. This year, the various different drainages had different amounts of snow. Some were huge. Right, San Juan's got hit. The Yampa area got hit, and those increased snowpacks are definitely melting fast. And then on the Front Range, we're getting not only snowpack melt, but we're getting rain as well. And with all of the pavement, that rainwater is getting into the creeks pretty quick. And so increased flows, everything coming at you faster when you're on the water. The normal eddies might not be there to eddy out. The strainers, they're tough this time of year, right? With the increased erosion from the higher stream flows, dropping trees into the water like we saw on the Blue. It's making stuff dangerous. And we got to respect what's going on. We got to be paying attention. We got to scout the rivers before we go. We got to go with knowledgeable people. This is the time of year, the year and the time of year to really up your game from a safety standpoint, right? Jason, as you're talking about, it's tough out there right now. It's super fun, but also dangerous. Oh, yeah. And so you got to balance that. And, we still got a big snowpack, and it's going to come for a while. And so I expect the rivers to stay high for quite a while. I expect the raft companies are going to love it. They're going to have a good long season. And hopefully, folks, if you don't have the experience, right, if you're not dialed in on a class 4, class 5 rapid, don't go there, or go with a guide, right? Scale it back and recognize that the rivers are different this year. They're just high. And it changes so many factors.
And they're staying high too. We're just seeing like sustained flows, not that sudden pulse that we, typically get in, a typical Colorado summer. That cool, wet spring kind of has prolonged our whitewater season. The rivers are staying up. And Lloyd, you've already been up in the high country, up in the Alpine, probably a bunch this season, and that snow is going to pose challenges on 14ers as well as some of the high peaks, not just down in the valleys anymore. What are you seeing up high in terms of, some access and maybe some issues that might be, I don't know, hikers might be surprised when they find their, typical trail buried in several feet of snow, right?
Exactly. People really need to pay attention to what slope aspect they're going to be on. Is it a north-facing slope like Mount Bierstadt? Might still have a ton of snow on it. Yesterday, we were running a helicopter log transport operation on Gray's Peak, up about 13,000 feet. Still tons of snow on Grays. Torrey's itself and the transit over to it, still snow packed. People really need to understand that anytime you're crossing snow now, and many of the trails that you might conventionally be able to climb free of snow this time of year, there's still a lot of it up there. If it's early morning, it's probably frozen. You really need micro spikes or crampons, boots, ice axe. I mean, when I was up there yesterday, the vast majority of people had at best micro spikes. Some people were just in kind of trail runners. Some people didn't really seem to have a lot of the gear you would really want. And due to our flight operations, we were stopping people for 60 and 90 minutes. And I think there were some surprised people, especially trail runners, who were up there who were like, wait, I don't even have a shirt on. And you're saying I have to stop here at 13,000 feet? Like, people need to be prepared.
Yeah. And Jeff, we've spoken about this in the past. Last fall, I did a story on trail runners, kind of pushing that light is right ethos and, moving quickly through the backcountry. It's very popular right now, and it just leaves your margin for error just so razor thin. In fact, it looks like they're looking for a missing trail runner down south right now in La Plata County. Kind of curious as to what you're seeing in terms of reaching out to those, trail running types and, the hyper athletic, speedy type of hiker who maybe isn't going to, follow the, carry all 20 of these items in your backpack sort of, approach to or strategy when it comes to getting up there in the high country. What are you seeing on that end in terms of these, Colorado Uber runner types?
Yeah, you're right. It's super popular. The search right now down in Montezuma County and La Plata County, these guys move fast. And so from our standpoint, a search is a large area. And when they're up in difficult terrain, it's tough, right? They don't have a whole lot of margin for error. You fall off a ridge, or as Lloyd's talking about, right? You break an ankle at 13 and you don't have a shirt on. You got nothing. It's going to take us a while to get there if we even can learn about your situation. And so having the ability to call for help is great, but recognize that you are not guaranteed a helicopter. It's weather dependent. It's helicopter availability. It's whatever else is going on in the state, right? With fires going right now, there's a lot of use of aviation on fires. So do not rely upon rescue to get there quick. Do not expect a helicopter. We're going to get you the resources we can if we know about it, which might be a satellite communicator. But in all reality, you're going to go challenge one-on-one. You're going to go challenge these mountains. These are big mountains, and they can be dangerous if you don't respect them, if you don't pay attention to what's the weather going to be, what kind of elevation am I going to be at, what's going to happen if, right, and play through some of those scenarios. And be conservative with it. And I think, quite frankly, a big piece of this is the solo trail runner. And sure, you can dramatically help your odds if you're running with somebody else. Right? Find somebody who you get along with, who runs at the same pace, has the same objectives, and go together. It can really make a big difference. We had a couple of folks last year, trail runners who didn't make it. And, I don't know what's going on with the one currently. I think the search is still going on, but it's been going for a couple of days now. It's not looking super positive down there.
That's scary.
Jason, if I could jump in on that to follow up, because you talk about the runners as if everyone is here. I've been on several peaks this season, and especially yesterday had ample time to talk to people. And in every place that I've been, I would say easily over 50% of the people have been from out of state. Looking at license plates in the trailheads, talking to people yesterday on the mountains. I mean, I would say maybe fewer than 10% of the people on Grays yesterday were from Colorado. Most were from out of state. I think people probably plan their vacations ahead of time, and so they're showing up whether they're really ready for and geared up for the conditions. And I think whether it's, climbing a 14er, whether it's getting on a river, sometimes people get set in their schedule, and they don't know that they really need to adjust their schedule based upon what, in our case, the mountain is dishing out. Mountain doesn't care you set your vacation a couple of months ago. It's still winter in some places, and you better be ready for that.
How do we reach those? We've seen, like, say, I remember talking with Mountain Rescue Aspen years ago when they were having some troubles on the elks out there, obviously expert kind of climbs up there for those high peaks. And they had a lot of success, a lot of traction going out, having meetings in Denver and trying to reach climbers, where they are and convey the message that, hey, if you're a first time 14er climber, maybe, Capitol Peak's not your, or Snowmass or something like that is not the best idea. How do you reach those folks, either one of y'all, Jeff or Lloyd, in terms of, they're not in Colorado? We could do a pretty good job of reaching Colorado people. Here we are on a Colorado Sun podcast, or I bet that's going to, reach a lot of local folks. How do you get those folks that are on holiday like that? How can we get that message out to them?
Well, yeah, I don't know. Jeff, do you want to go? Do you want me to go? What? How do you want it?
Go ahead, Lloyd. I have some thoughts on that as well, but go ahead.
Okay. So years ago, we kind of realized that, just in terms of people who know enough about us and donate to us, like we've got people essentially in all of the states and in some foreign countries. And if that's any indication of how popular the 14ers are a draw, we knew that we needed to reach people well before they got to a trailhead. If you have something on a kiosk and they see that, I'm guessing most people aren't turning around and going home. So we've spent a lot of time working on through YouTube and creating a YouTube channel. It now has more than about 80 videos. We've got things about mountain weather, about we talk to a lot of rescue folks about mountain safety and guides and everything botany to leave no trace, because we know we need to use social media and use that YouTube channel as a point to start pumping out messages in hopes we get people well before they get here. Certainly, we hope at the time they're starting to plan a trip.
Sure.
Yeah, and if I could add to that, there's really a huge amount of work being done, collaborative work amongst a number of entities within Colorado. And I think that Colorado Tourism Office is very much on board with this, trying to reach out outside of Colorado, right? And really, the shift has been, I think, from promoting tourism to promoting stewardship, right? Promoting responsible tourism with the locals, but also with those folks who are coming in. And part of this is respecting the environment, exactly what Lloyd's saying. And to let folks know that, it might be pool season down in Texas, up on our peaks, you bring your winter gear. And you got to be ready for that kind of thing. And I think that having OREC and the state behind what we're doing is super important, because they're the ones who are bringing it in. Having the destination marketing folks behind what we're doing, getting the information out to those people that they're attracting to their local communities, is the way to reach these people. Right? We're not going to reach everybody. I get that, but let's make a dent. Let's make a difference where we can make a difference. And so the Forest Service is involved in some of these things. BLM, the state parks and wildlife is doing a ton of work on this as well. So I think it's been recognized and we're starting to make gains, but there's a huge number of people that come to Colorado, and it's really hard to reach all of them. And I would say, kudos to Lloyd and 14ers Initiative. They have a great set of videos online. Everybody from coming to Colorado who's thinking about getting up in the high country, go watch those. They're not going to give you the experience, but they're going to give you some things to think about. So hopefully you can gain that experience in an appropriate way at appropriate pace.
Sure, and have the most fun you can of it up there when you get up there, right? That's kind of...
yeah, right. Enjoy the views, enjoy the experience. I don't know. I mean, it's a balancing act. Being safe and having fun, two sides of the same coin.
Yeah, exactly. So, Lloyd, we get a bunch of questions from readers here, and one of the most common questions is, what 14ers pose the most problems? I figure both of you guys know something about that. We know, seems like we hear a lot about the elks when things go south there, they get really bad. but obviously Bierstadt and Grey's Antorcha see a lot of traffic. Where are kind of the trouble spots, if so to speak, in terms of search and rescue operations and incidents that require, I don't know, rescues and searches?
Well, so Colorado's 14ers are these approachable Everests, right? There are only 3 states in the lower 48 that have 14ers. We are the market leader in them. And I think in some ways, one of the challenges we have is that the vast majority of them are either hiking on a developed trail or they're just light off trail scrambling, right? You probably are not, maybe rarely having to put down a third hand. So you can do about 40 of the, depending on how you want to count it, 53, 58 peaks without needing a whole bunch of experience. And then we've got, like I think it's 19 where you need to be much more aware of where you are, have more skills in your tool belt, know how to navigate. You're not on a trail. You're not on anything that looks like a trail. And that's where we start to, I think, see more problems. I mean, on any mountain, you can run into trouble with altitude if you don't deal well with altitude. We've had people where they've had heart attacks because they're doing something beyond their physical ability. We've had people occasionally get hit by lightning, right? So there are some things where you're at risk if no matter where you are. But when you look at when people especially are dying on 14ers, it's in the, maybe 7 to 10 peaks where you really start having complex route finding. It's much steeper, more likely to have loose rock, and all of the peaks that you've climbed before and any ambition you have to climb all of them just does not transfer to this last group of peaks. And that's where we see, it's been the Crestones. It's in recent years, it's the Challenger Kit Carson and some of the navigational twists and turns in really steep terrain. You have to go there. The Elks have always been, trouble spots. And we had a few years, but 2017 was the big year where a lot of people were thinking, oh, I'll take a shortcut. Like, there are no shortcuts. If there were shortcuts, it would be the route. So don't think, deviating from the route. I think the other, and Long's Peak, of course, has been just over the decades, the deadliest peak, largely, I think, because the easiest route is very hard and has long and has complex issues with it. And you combine it then with the Diamond and the technical climbs and some of the other routes there. I mean, it's in its own little universe of difficulty and complexity.
Yeah. I would echo what Lloyd's saying, but, I think we also need to add quandary into that. And it's from a rescue standpoint, the number of calls, the number of people correlates to the number of calls to some degree. And the I-70 type peaks get climbed because they have easy access. And there are a lot of people climbing those peaks who don't necessarily respect them and don't really understand what they're getting themselves into. And so we get a number of calls on those peaks. And people need to recognize also, especially if you're climbing up the east face of a peak like Quandary, you potentially cannot see the weather coming at you. And, weather typically comes from the west. And if you haven't paid attention to a forecast, if you're not really dialed on your time, your elevation, where you are and what's going on, you could find yourself in a bad spot with lightning, with rain, with snow. And you got to pay attention to that. And I think the other piece, Lloyd mentioned the Sangres, big mountains, but also recognize that there's not a whole lot of population down there. And to get calls up on those big mountains, the rescue teams on there do a great job, but they don't have the same kind of population to pull from that the teams along I-70 do. And so It's hard to get up in there and effectuate rescues on some of these nasty faces. And so just know that, anywhere you go out, you have to take responsibility for yourself. You have to think about being conservative, right? It is not downtown Denver where an ambulance is going to be there in 5 minutes. It's just not going to happen. And that's part of the allure of being there. That's part of the adventure. but recognize that it's not going to be instantaneous. Somebody's going to swoop in and save your day.
Yeah, really good points. What do you guys use for your weather? If you're checking weather before you are gonna night before you go out, what site do you guys typically use?
Lloyd, go ahead.
So two different things if you're thinking 14ers for me. So if you go to the desktop version of the National Weather Services site, which is weather.gov, it has a search box. People might know this. You can actually type in the name of a Colorado 14er and it will give you the forecast details for that specific peak. The other service that I use, I think they let you get a few days view for free, but I have the paid version, which is, I don't know, $19 or something, is the Open Summit / Open Snow site. So skiers know it from Open Snow in the winter, but in the summer, it'll have things for all sorts of different peaks. So, but I have to add the caveat that no matter how good and the weather details that you can get now, forecasts and look at radar maps and smoke maps and all this craziness. 2 days ago, a colleague of mine was down trying to put a trail counter on Blanca Peak. All of the forecasts were saying there's not going to be rain for several days. He is in his tent high on the mountain. At 5 o'clock, it's raining. At like 7 o'clock, there's lightning and thunder. He was at a point where he was able to get cell coverage down to the San Luis Valley. He's calling his wife to say, can you look at like anything with radars? There was nothing showing this weather, and it was right on top of him. So I think the message I would always say is, with all of this technological, gadgets that we have now and services and everything, these eyes and your ears and swiveling your head to look at things, that is the best forecast tool you have. No matter how great the forecast, if you're seeing buildup of clouds, you're hearing thunder, like, pay attention to where you are and be cautious.
Sure. Maybe don't go above tree line if you're seeing that coming.
Yeah, I agree. I go direct to the National Weather Service as well, and get kind of geeked out on the weather piece. But I think that there's an associated piece here, which Lloyd touched on. Cell phone connectivity is a huge issue. And this is something, especially the folks coming in from out of state, don't seem to get, is if you want to use your cell phone, one, preserve its batteries, carry an extra battery. Don't expect that you're going to have access to cell phone coverage for internet or for phone calls or for text messages. It might just not happen depending upon where you are. And so download maps beforehand. Look at the weather beforehand, and prepare. It's a great tool, no doubt. But if you haven't stacked that tool the way you need to, it's not going to do you any good. And if you spend all your time taking videos and listening to music and whatnot, and you kill your cell battery, it's tough. Even if you're in cell phone coverage, it's very common for us to get a phone call from somebody saying, hey, I got 3% battery. I got to talk fast. And the rescue is going to take a couple of hours. And by the time we get in the area, their cell phone's dead. And we've lost connection with them. And so it just makes things that much harder for us and that much more dangerous for the folks who need us.
And Jeff, just to add on that, certainly in terms of like route information, it's also great to go old school and actually print something out on a piece of paper, because even if your phone still has battery, like I was up on a project in the Challenger Kit Carson area, and I fumbled my phone and dropped it. And of course, luck of the draw, it falls on the screen side down. All of a sudden, like a lot of the functionality of the phone was not working. I still had battery. I would have had cell coverage in this narrow window, but I messed up my phone. So don't get high on some more complicated route finding peak and then drop your phone and all of your information is just vaporized.
Yeah, very good point. I think it's kind of tough for the folks coming in from out of county or out of state to find a printer anymore, to print something. But I agree with you. And maybe that means go buy a book and take the book with you as well, right? Print the map, take the book, whatever it is. But yeah, have a backup.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Lloyd, let's switch gears a little bit here. You've been sort of at the forefront in the past couple of years on some access issues to 14ers. This sort of sidebar on actual mountain safety, but access is becoming an increasingly poignant issue as we get up into the 14ers, seeing a lot of increasing number of landowners concerned about their liability stemming from a decision out of the Air Force Academy where the Air Force Academy was held liable for a person who was injured riding their bike on a bike path there. And that has conceivably opened up liability issues for landowners that allow recreational access on their land. Used to be protected, or used to feel more protected under the Colorado Recreational Use Statute. We're seeing increasing calls for reform of that statute, and maybe some way to kind of increase protections for landowners so they can keep their land open for folks who may be passing through to access public lands or, actually climbing on those lands. Where are we at on some of this reform for the recreational use statute and access those 14ers outside of Alma and down the San Luis Valley?
Yeah, so first important, and this comes as a news flash to a lot of people who are so used to our public lands being public, right? So they think, oh, I'm going to the mountains, that's public. Because of the history of the Spanish land grants in the southern part of the state and mining in a lot of our mountain areas in the San Juans and the Mosquito Range in particular, there are lots of mining claims that are private land. More than 10% of the summits of 14ers are on private land. And a number of those have closed in recent years. So just to kind of go over it so people know, down south you have Culebra, which is entirely private. You have to, pay a fee and sign a waiver to go there. Mount Lindsay, most of the route is on public land, but the summit is on a private ranch. That has been closed since 2021. All of the peaks in the Mosquito Range are on private land. Sherman's a sort of a defunct mining company where nobody's posted anything about it being closed, but it could close depending upon how a bankruptcy court proceeding works. And then, the big kahuna is sort of the DeCalibron Loop, Democrat, Lincoln, Cameron, Bross. Bross, because of all these fractional owners, has really never opened legally to the public since like the mid 2000s. And right now, today, the other peaks, the Lincoln, Democrat, Bross, Cameron's actually on public land, but it's accessed by the private land. Those are closed. There's some hope in working with the landowner. Maybe by midsummer, that might be some of the waivers and things might have been worked out to allow that to be open. But for now, it is closed. And so, 14ers are tip of the iceberg. I'm sure there are lots of other recreational destinations that might be closed. And the reason is that we had this recreational use statute. I think virtually every state in the country has one. Because of the Air Force Academy case, insurers have gotten very nervous. People don't know whether the law really covers them. People are just saying, I'd be a fool to let people on the land. So there is an effort, a growing coalition called Fix CRUS. There's a website, fixcrus.org, if people want to follow it. There's a petition. I think more than about 2,000 people have signed it so far. There was a bill in the legislature this spring. Unfortunately, it tended to play out as a partisan issue, with Republicans largely being the supporters on behalf of landowners, and in an overwhelmingly Democratic legislature, that didn't go very far. But there have been a lot of efforts, and because of things like closing 14ers, because of a lot of other landowners getting really concerned, I think more people on the blue side of the aisle are realizing that this could have major impacts on recreation. We've had a lot more people in the legislature who are working with the coalition and have either pledged that they're going to help sponsor something or are actively considering and trying to get to a point of supporting it. The dilemma is you have the trial lawyers who are very much opposed to this notion, without getting into all of the details of willful and
Yeah,
reckless or willful and wanton, right? Like we don't want to go there. But hopefully we're getting to a point where there's legal language people are agreeing on. There's a broader coalition. People are more aware of the impacts of, hey, we're closing stuff down unless we're better protected.
and that's really, I mean, I think it's moved on from maybe a single landowner kind of issue to really starting to spread across more landowners, more peaks. And it's not just the peaks, it's fishing access, it's crossing a piece of private property to access your favorite fishing hole or stream or something like that. So I think I feel like there's momentum growing behind this as more landowners are coming around. I was talking with a landowner this week about some liability issues, and he basically said, if you're a landowner and you haven't closed your land and posted no trespassing signs, it's because you're not paying attention to what's happening right now with the liability issues. So a lot of concern out there. And like you said, I think there's some momentum on maybe getting some reform to that recreational use statute. Certainly the lawmakers seem to be paying attention, right?
Yeah, they seem to be.
Cool. Jeff, let's talk a little bit about statewide search and rescue efforts. You guys, we talked about this a little bit with Backcountry. You guys are working a plan to expand your services for your volunteer teams, maybe getting some funding out of the Keep Colorado Wild Pass, some kind of first time ever we're directing public funds into search and rescue, specifically for search and rescue, instead of just trimming it from sheriff budgets. I feel like you guys are on the cusp of really formalizing, standardizing some ways to care for your volunteers, take care of them, as well as improve our safety and response in the backcountry. Where are you guys at in terms of some of that funding rolling in, and kind of you guys got some bridge funding right before the pass money starts rolling in? Something I've always been really interested in, watching how you guys are going to ramp up care for some of your volunteers for search and rescue.
Yeah, good question, Jason. I really am appreciative of the work done at the legislative level, the work done with so many state agencies. Colorado is really kind of on the cutting edge of what the state is doing from the standpoint of we're attracting all these visitors, right? The outdoor recreation industry, the tourism industry in Colorado is huge. And we need to recognize that we're marketing Colorado in such a way that when people come here, they expect services, reasonably so. And those services are provided by, from a backcountry search and rescue standpoint, provided by volunteers. And, I've held for the longest time that all emergency response in Colorado, whether it's law enforcement, whether it's fire, whether it's EMS, whether it's search and rescue, needs more support, needs more help. They are pushed, all of us, all of the different facets of emergency response have been pushed really hard with the increase in population, with the increase in tourism. And I think that Colorado is starting to recognize that and starting to support all of these agencies. From a fire standpoint, we need to be really careful about what's going on right now, right? We got big fires going right now. We've got the potential for a really dangerous fire summer. And so I want to talk about backcountry search and rescue, but I think we also need to recognize, especially the law enforcement and the fire issues that are going on as well, because they are all intertwined. And we share resources back and forth amongst all of us. From a backcountry search and rescue standpoint, however, I think that Colorado recognizing that the volunteers who are out there doing dangerous work in the middle of the night and in these crazy conditions, when somebody calls for help, they need our support, and they need to be assured that the communities have their back. Right, the volunteers have the back of their communities. The communities also need to be there to support their volunteers, and it is so important. And so the state funding, you talked about the bridge funding. The large majority of that is out to the teams, out to the sheriffs. A lot of new vehicles have been bought to replace some of these old, broken down type vehicles. A lot of safety equipment has been purchased. So, we're working on plans to how do we make this a sustainable project that we're getting the resources where they need to go. And, we have a fair amount of money coming in, but recognize that if we wanted to really do this right, those people who volunteer their time, they give their experience, they give a huge number of hours, they risk their lives to make this happen, and they're paying out of pocket. They're paying millions of dollars out of pocket to go rescue folks who they don't know. And I'd like to see us get to the point where we can reimburse them, right? Give their time, give their experience, but don't pay for it. Get reimbursed for everything that you have to pay to make this happen, and make it so that there aren't these barriers to entry or barriers to retention for these volunteers. So while I think we are on the cutting edge, I think we still have a long way to go to make this happen. And I think that the government side has stepped up and has kind of led the charge here. I think we also need to think about the Colorado business economy, and they're benefiting from the trails on the 14ers. They're benefiting from these emergency services. And how do we get them to be a partner as well in helping sustain the Colorado way of life, really?
That's the second time you've said something today about the interconnected and realizing that, all this stuff is sort of interwoven. When you think about it, think back 10 years, you had your public lands wildfire team, and you had your search and rescue team and law enforcement. You had your lawmakers, you had tourism, you had outdoor recreation, everybody's in a silo. And, we're starting to see like this growing awareness, like what you've been talking about, that, tourism and outdoor recreation are intimately connected. And the leave no trace principles should be a part of the tourism office's marketing of tourism as they manage, instead of, just market. And then you're talking about, lawmakers kind of coming around and wildfire teams recognizing, their importance and their work and how that influences search and rescue access and different things like this. It seems like, are we at this cusp where everyone's starting to realize how we're all connected on all this stuff? We use Lloyd's research on 14ers to show, kind of how many people are coming around. You got this kind of a rescue patterns project down on Crestone that I want you to talk about, but it seems like the information's starting to all come together, and we're looking at it and we're saying, wow, this is not just search and rescue. We could get the tourism folks at the table. Let's get OREC at the table. Let's get law enforcement and wildfire management and federal lawmakers and state lawmakers and get some funding in here. And I don't know, you guys feel that vibe, that there's this interconnectedness that we're all starting to recognize?
Yeah. So from my standpoint, definitely. And, I think it continues beyond that. I think that agriculture is involved in this as well. I think that water use is involved in this as well, right? And water managers. And so there is a huge interconnected web in so many ways in what we're talking about here, right? It's so many facets of Colorado that come into this, that attract people, that are why people come here for vacation, or they move here, or businesses move here. And it's driving all kinds of things, from housing costs and the ability to live here, right? And all of these things cycle around each other, very, very complex. But I'm also seeing a lot of things. Lloyd and I are both part of a 14er visioning process, which is a collaborative, multi-agency, big process to try to tackle some of these ideas and work on sustainability and start to try to predict what's going to happen in the future and what we can do to provide the appropriate services, to make sure people are safe, and to protect our environment, right? To be good stewards of our communities and our environment, and kind of get Colorado to where we want it to be, right? Where people take care of each other, people take care of the state. And I think that it really is blossoming the way you're saying, Jason, in that we're starting to see these interconnected webs brought together. And quite frankly, one of the things that, in my experience at least, is helping this was the move to online meetings from COVID and the ability to have lots of people from all over the place not have to drive and spend days to go to meetings. We're doing a lot of stuff online now, and we're able then to attract more different people together. And so, disadvantaged communities now have a place at the table. And people from out of state might have a place at the table, and different parts of the economy have a place at the table. And we can hear what their concerns are. And I think it's really making a big difference. But we've got a lot of work to do. Lloyd, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, yes, I certainly understand the interconnectedness of stuff. Like, I will try to explain that, like, being a prepared hiker is actually conservation. And the reason why is, like, if you've planned ahead and you know your route and you've chosen to peak in a route that is appropriate with your skills and you've got enough equipment and everything, you are likely to, even if you run into trouble, be better protected. Whereas if you're the person who goes up there and you're going light and fast and you have nothing and you get into trouble, or you didn't prepare with your map and know where you are, you get lost someplace. Now all of a sudden search and rescue people are trampling through really sensitive alpine terrain and probably causing impacts there. Whereas if you were prepared, that wouldn't need to be happening. The thing that I worry about through some of these, like this 14er visioning effort, is that there are some voices who seem to be not realizing how the interconnectedness could work together, but might be seeing, oh my God, there are just too many people. There are too many people here, too many people there, too many people camping in the woods, too many people hiking mountains. Let's just stop. Let's put the stop button. And so that's where I sometimes worry that some people don't realize we could have a beneficial sort of circle. What do they call it? The circular economy, where everyone's kind of benefiting. Or we could start getting people who just sort of say, well, I don't like this part of it, so just push stop and let's get fewer people out there. Let's, which would be sort of a negative circular thing in my view, where it's just like, well, I just want to protect my thing, and everyone else can find someplace else to go.
Yeah. Good point. And there's definitely a balancing act there, and to bring people to the table with open minds to think about this and to recognize that there is probably a carrying capacity. Right? How many people can climb Quandary in a day? Right? There is a limit, especially if they're all going up the number. And so we've got to figure out what is that. And even if you don't get to the limit, you're damaging the experience of everybody involved if there's too many people, right? And so,
well, it's an interesting discussion, and so let me just sort of segue that we are releasing tomorrow our hiking use estimates on the 14ers for the year 2022. But since we have this great opportunity, I'll release them here first. So we are actually seeing significant decreases in the number of people on 14ers. So, for example, to Quandary Peak, your example there, Jeff, we had in the pandemic year 49,000 people. This year we were estimating, and this is actually we didn't estimate. This is 100% data collected for our field season, that we had 22,270. Wow. So we have had more than more than 50% decrease in people on Quandary. And a lot of that came from, the parking reservations and paid parking and shuttle. It was initially free, but then's paid. We saw, and again, where we have a trail counter with, we had 95% of the season with data. Grays and Tories dropped substantially. So we are seeing in some of these higher use peaks, usually parking and access restrictions saying, don't come here. And so I think that could be a dangerous thing. I mean, we're really almost back to the numbers that we had. So we were estimating 279,000 people climbed 14ers during the major season last summer. We had 415,000 in 2020. When we first started doing this project in 2015, we had an estimate of 260,000. We are the fewest number of 14er climbers since that period.
Wow.
Hey,
That
Lloyd, a
is so
follow-up question on those numbers. If people have already climbed Bierstadt and Evans, Torres, Grays, Quandary, right, the kind of the ones that are easy to access, are they now moving on to other peaks? And so you're seeing a rise in the next set of peaks that they're going to?
No, because I mean, you have to understand that there are people constantly going everywhere. Our biggest use peaks tend to be those in the Front Range and Mosquito and Suat. So it's basically Gray's Torreys, Bierstadt, Elbert, and the DeCalibron Loop.
Mm-hmm.
So people, when you start getting to more the outlying ranges, you have maybe like the Sangres. Like nobody goes to the Sangres, and the peaks there will have either less than 1,000 or sometimes in the 1,000 to 3,000. In the San Juans, you're kind of about there. You have a few peaks like Handies and Uncompahgre where maybe you've got 3 to 5 to 7,000 people out there. The vast majority of use is on these close in, easy, accessible peaks. And those are where we're having communities say, like, no mas, we got too many people here. We have parking on roads and we can't get search and rescue vehicles in. So stop. And maybe there's some effort to get shuttles going and things like that. But the kind of the moment we're in is kind of curious because on one hand, we continue to be a society that's more screen addicted and, kind of unhealthful because people are not getting out, and health people say, go out, recreate, do that. We've been investing literally millions of dollars in an infrastructure on 14er peaks so that people can get out there. And there's this perception that more people equals more impact. Yes, Jeff, to your comment, there's a change in the sense of solitude and encounters with people, but we actually find there's less on the ground impact to the resource, to the rare and fragile tundra plants. When we have a good trail and it's easy to follow and we've built it up, like it can handle, like I've been on Quandary a bazillion times, right? We build that trail, and aside from a few spots where people are cutting switchbacks and so forth, and there's certainly poop issues near timberline and stuff, but you can get more people there, and the trail was in much better shape than it was a decade ago. So I think there's, again, this people getting their head around, it's not necessarily a conservation problem if you have a lot of people out there. We need to make sure they're trained. We need to make sure they're staying on the trail and they're, using leave no trace. But I worry that we're going down this negative direction where people are saying there's just too much of cars or too much of dogs or whatever. And so let's just stop. And I think, like, is this the canary in the coal mine for Colorado and our recreation-based economy, that people are, just saying, too many people. And like, now we start going in a negative direction.
That's super interesting that you say that, because, we've been seeing that kind of this, backlash coming out of the pandemic and during the pandemic, really in the mountain towns, with, a lot of those locals there saying, wow, we're really crowded, and, there's not enough labor, and my God, housing is so expensive, and, real legitimate concerns. But they're accompanying with those concerns with, do we really have to be a tourism economy? Do we really need tourists? And, there's folks in that town that run businesses that say resoundingly, yes, we do need tourists. We are a tourist town, and you're not going to like what happens in this town when the tourists go away. And I think, like you said, if we start, I don't know, down that path that you were said towards negativity, saying, don't come here, we're full, Colorado's full, pack it up, turn around. I don't know if we're going to like what we're going to see. I don't know if we're going to like the business unfolding and evolution of these towns without visitors. They are tourist towns, and there's a reason why people want to come visit them. There's a reason why people want to live there too. But those economies are squarely dependent on, influxes of visitors and spending. And that's it's really interesting to see that decline. what are some other reasons you think might be there behind that decline? You know, I feel like if you've hiked Bierstadt or Grazer Tories on a busy Saturday, that might be a box you'll check off and say, let's not do that again.
Yeah, I mean, most of the peaks are generally staying in the same range. We saw again, it was like an 8% decrease in the statewide use, but the 24,000 fewer hiker days, roughly 16,000 of that came from just Gray's, Tories, and Quandary, right? So some others were sort of trending down. That's consistent. 2020 was the high water mark. People were afraid for their life. They wanted to do something that was kind of safe and they could have some fun. Climbing a 14er in fresh air is a pretty good thing, right? So we saw a decrease in 2021, but we're starting to see between access restrictions, between parking restrictions, in some of these bigger ones, they're going down. The other ones are just the use level is so small that it's not as consequential, right? So maybe a peak goes from having 3,000 to 2,500. The impact on the resource and everything is not terribly different at 3,000 versus 2,500. But certainly you start looking at some of these communities and maybe they will voluntarily say, like, we want fewer people coming here and we don't think people are spending money. They're buying stuff in Denver and they're just passing through our town. Maybe some of them will choose that decision, to say like, no, that's okay. But I imagine others might, again, be careful what you wish for. They might not like the answer.
That's very true. I know. I've said that before in a couple presentations, and how these towns saw a lot of new coming residents move in during the pandemic, and sort of cultural shifting pressures in some of these small towns, especially with the price of housing and things like that. And it's really sparked some interesting discussions among locals about what they want their community to look at. Wrote a story a month ago out of Headwaters Economics Group out of Montana, writing a story about the amenity trap and how this balance between conservation, recreation, tourism, and protecting local lifestyles, and the reason everybody moved there in the first place, is becoming an increasingly delicate dance in mountain valleys. And I think we're seeing that. It's fascinating to see that decline in traffic on the Colorado 14ers. It's really, really interesting. We didn't see that in skiing. Everybody says that was only 15 million people went skiing last winter in Colorado, they said, or 15 skier days, 15 million. So yeah, that's peculiar. Maybe we need an icon and an epic pass to go up to the 14ers, and then you'll be up there to record levels again or something like that.
Yeah, I don't think that we judge success by record levels of people, right? But it's just, is it necessarily in the state's best interest to say, don't go here? Because, and some people will say, well, the 14ers are overrun, let's shift them to the 13ers. And that's where I would say from a conservation perspective, the biggest challenge with 14ers was use started to occur before there's a trail network. There was colossal impact to, braiding of trails and trampling of incredibly rare and fragile vegetation. In some cases, plants that don't really exist much of any other places in the world. And so do we want to just start randomly sending people out to areas that, again, don't have trail networks, where we may not have trailhead facilities? Like, we might be causing more impact to the resource. And I don't know how it would affect like Jeff and your rescue groups. It must be a hassle to be constantly getting people on Quandary and Bierstadt. But if you just start shooting them out every place else, is there some network of knowledge and facilities and resources where, okay, we're going to the same place, this is annoying, but it might be even worse if people are just randomly all over in corners that they've never been to before?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, while it's from a rescue standpoint, to go back up the same trail again to rescue somebody with a broken ankle, it gets a little monotonous. But at the same time, if we had to go search for people all over the place, searches take a long time, and that's volunteer time that's being used is time off of work or time away from family or whatnot. To some degree, I don't know if I should say this out loud, but to have the tourist stay focused in one area makes a lot of sense. It's kind of a management plan to say, hey, let's put these folks there. And we all know that the locals go wherever the locals want to go. And they know the traffic patterns, they figure it out. And if they want solitude, they know where to go get solitude. And at the same time, we rescue more out of town folks than we do locals across the state.
Oh, wow.
And so our services are available to anybody, right? Somebody with Alzheimer's or a little kid or whatever. It doesn't matter to us. Anybody who calls for help, we'll go get them. But the majority of our work is for folks from out of town.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, we got a bunch of questions. Let's do like rapid fire here. We got 5 minutes, 4 minutes. Questions from readers. What age do you recommend hiking with children?
Well, if we're talking 14ers, I took my son up his first 14er when he was 10.
There you go.
Are they hiking or can you carry them?
Yeah, there you go. Put him in a book.
I took my 3-year-old.
Well, I made him hike.
14er, but
that sounds terrible. What are signs that you should descend if you're experiencing altitude sickness? Usually, I've seen this before. It's crushing headache is what I've seen. And then if you do have that, is there any speed with which should you hurry down if you're altitude sick, or should you take your time?
Lloyd, you want to take that? You want me to take it?
Well, yeah. I mean, you want to get the best cure for altitude sickness is, one, if you can get some fluids into you, but get down to a lower altitude and do that as quickly as is safely practical, right? Don't run pell-mell down the slope, right, and fall and hit your head, but get down there, don't dawdle.
And apparently Colorado Sun readers are quite concerned about bears. So we got many questions about the very best bear deterrent you can find. Always reminds me of the joke to carry pepper spray and wear bells. And how do you identify bear scat? It smells like pepper and it has little bells in it.
Yeah, it's funny. I don't think I've ever seen I'm in starting year 15 here at CFI and I'm out on the 14. I don't think I've ever seen a bear. I've seen moose. I'm afraid of moose. I see a lot more of them all the time. I've seen a couple of mountain lions, but bears, not so much.
Yeah, I think it's actually, expand on the question, it's respect wildlife and don't approach them. Whether it's goats or moose or deer or elk or whatever it is, they're all not going to be happy with you if they have young around and you get in between a young whatever and their moms, and just stay away. Observe them from a distance. And the number of bear attacks that I've been involved with from a search and rescue standpoint is one, and it was between a mom and a cub. And so, yeah, I don't know that this is a huge number that we need to be paying attention to, but I think Lloyd's right. Be super careful around the moose. They're the ones that we got to be watching out for.
Sure. And I think just in general, we'll wrap up here. You've said it a couple times, Jeff, take a little respect for this environment. This is not Disneyland. These environments have not been prepared for your safety. They are filled with risks. And I got a friend, Chris Davenport, he likes to say, become fluent in speaking the mountain so that you can identify the language of the mountains when you're out there and maybe pick up on threats and, listen to your intuition. But generally all of this starts with safety, with respecting what goes on in the mountains and, recognizing dangers. And really it comes from, holding these special places and recognizing that they are very special. And
have a sense of patience, right? I can't tell you the number of people like, oh my God, I needed to climb this mountain today. It's going to be there in a long, long time. So if today isn't good, the weather isn't good, you aren't feeling well, just don't push it,
Yeah, I think that the corollary to that is take responsibility for yourself as well, right? Respect the environment and take responsibility for yourself and those who you're with. Don't expect somebody's going to be there with a Happy Meal if you get hungry. It's not going to happen, right?
Yeah.
You've got to step up and take that responsibility and have fun,
Perfect.
right? I mean, in all reality, people are here to have fun, and they should have fun. They should enjoy themselves and come to Colorado and make memories, right? It's a huge
That's
thing.
easy to do. Like, it's really easy to do up there. You know, I don't want these talks that we do to ever be like, oh, you know, it's so scary and frightening and don't ever do it. Like, we want people to get out there and enjoy their public lands and become the next generation of public land stewards and, you know, find out all the great things that we know when we go up and play in the backcountry. Like, this is something we should share. And in that vein, I really appreciate you, Lloyd and Jeff, taking time and helping us better enjoy our time when we step out in the backcountry, right?
Yeah, well, thank you, Jason. Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, guys.